Hi, everybody. My name is Luana Lewis with the Better Business Bureau serving Metro New York. Welcome. We'll be starting our webinar, Protecting Your Small Business and Your Customers Online, in just one more minute. So please hang in with us. And we're excited to be presenting this program to you today. While we're waiting, let me just mention that questions for our speaker today are welcome. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And if you would like to enter questions in there for Adam Hirsch, he will answer as possible toward the end of the session. And now it's 1 o'clock, so let's begin. I'd like to introduce Claire Rosenzweig, President and CEO of the Better Business Bureau serving Metro New York, to introduce our speaker. Claire.
Thank you, Luana. And welcome, everybody. Welcome to Protecting Your Small Business and Your Customers Online. We are very proud to be presenting this through the Better Business Bureau serving Metro New York, as well as your local Better Business Bureau. You know, the Better Business Bureau, and by the way, I'm Claire, as Luana was saying. I'm the president and CEO of the BBB of Metro New York, as well as our BBB Education and Research Foundation. The Better Business Bureau system, we say that we are the sign of a better business, and you can find better businesses at bbb.org. Our vision is to have an ethical marketplace where buyers and sellers can trust each other, and our mission is to be leaders in advancing marketplace trust. And how do we do that? We do that by being a standards-based organization. We set standards for marketplace trust. We encourage and support best practices. We celebrate marketplace role models. We also call out substandard marketplace behavior, because really our goal is to create a community of trustworthy businesses. And we're so happy that you're here today. We are proud to present our speaker, Adam K. Hirsch, Esquire, who's with the Consumer Protection, with the Federal Trade Commission as a consumer protection attorney. We have known Adam for some time, and we believe that you're really going to learn a lot from him today. So with that, over to you.
Thank you very much, Claire. And thank you to the Better Business Bureau serving Metropolitan New York for hosting me today. I think this is an important topic, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to discuss it with all of you. As Claire said, my name is Adam Hirsch. I'm an attorney at the Federal Trade Commission's Northeast Regional Office, which is located here in New York City. And I work in our Bureau of Consumer Protection, focusing on frauds and scams that target everyday consumers and businesses. The Federal Trade Commission is an independent federal agency that works to protect consumers through a number of channels. We do that through civil law enforcement, which means identifying, investigating, and pursuing lawsuits against unfair and deceptive commercial practices that harm consumers or that harm businesses. We also do that through consumer and business education, events like today's, but also by compiling and making available a wealth of resources, both in print and on the FTC website, that really address every kind of commercial issue you can imagine: frauds, scams, unfair practices, as well as practical tips. And all that's available at ftc.gov, and I'll provide some more detailed resources as the presentation goes on. Before we get into the meat of today's presentation, I need to say that the remarks that I'm going to give today are my own, and they do not represent the position of the Commission as such or of any commission. I'm here today to talk about major online scams and technological threats that target small businesses and the customers of small businesses, and what you can do to protect yourself and your customers from those threats. Cyber criminals target companies of all sizes with technological attacks and sophisticated scams, but there are measures that you can take to protect your business and make sure that your business is not being used as a way to take advantage of customers. Some of these techniques involve understanding and using cybersecurity technology. but many of them are as simple as learning about the types of scams that are out there, having a plan to respond, and training your employees accordingly. So I'm going to cover some of the scams and other cybersecurity threats that we see at the FTC targeting small businesses and their customers, and some of the steps that you can take to protect yourselves from these attacks and spot them before they harm you. I'm also going to speak about a cybersecurity framework that was developed by the National Institutes of Standards and Technology that's designed to help businesses assess their cybersecurity needs and the protections that are available to them. And finally, as I mentioned, I will cover some of the resources that are available from the FTC and from other government agencies that can help you to have a well-developed cybersecurity plan and to respond to threats to your business. So let's start by talking about some of the cybersecurity risks that are out there. This chart is from the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. The FBI is the nation's central hub for reporting cybercrime, and their database of cybercrime reports gives a sense of the size and scope of cybercrime issues in the United States. As you can see from this chart, their reports reflect a dramatic increase in the number of cybercrimes and the amount of losses over the last 5 years. In 2023, the FBI received 880,000 reports of cybercrimes, resulting in $12.5 billion in losses. That reflects an almost 90% increase in reports from 2019, and more than a 250% increase in the amount of losses reported to the FBI. Now, of course, not every cyber incident is reported to the FBI. Not every cyber incident results in a loss. Not every loss is reported to the FBI. But the amount of growth in just those 5 years should give you a sense of the growth of this problem across the nation and how serious a threat cyber scams and other sorts of cybercrime are. So let's get into some of the kinds of cyber threats that are out there and how you can spot them. Many of the most dangerous online threats do not come from sophisticated technological hacks. They come from, instead, what hackers call social engineering and what I think the ordinary person would call a scam. In a social engineering scam, a scammer tries to get access to your network and use that to learn protected information or get money, and they do this by earning your trust. There are a few common ways that social engineering scammers try and get the sort of access they need. They may impersonate a government official, most often officials from the IRS, the Social Security Administration, even from the Federal Trade Commission itself. They might impersonate a widely used business. They like to use businesses that a lot of people and a lot of businesses across the country rely on. So major retailers or shippers, phone and internet companies, credit bureaus. In particular, when they're going after small businesses, they might also do their research and try and impersonate a supplier or a customer of that business. They might also even pretend to be an employee or a manager or the owner of the business and target other employees of a small business. Regardless of which sort of deception a scammer uses, there are a few telltale signs that what you're encountering is a scam, not legitimate outreach from the government, from another business, or from someone who works at your business. First, scammers demand quick action out of the blue. They try to convince you that you don't have time to think things through or to check with a trusted source of information. They tell you that you need to act right now or something terrible is going to happen, or you're going to miss out on a great opportunity. A legitimate government official, a legitimate business partner is obviously not going to act that way. And so there's always time to slow down and verify who you're speaking to. Someone who doesn't allow you that time is most likely a scammer. Second, scammers are going to try and get people to click on links that even if they can't verify them, and they're going to try and get people to respond to phone numbers, even if they can't verify that the call is really who it says it's from. So don't click on a link unless you're sure that the link is from a legitimate source, that you verified it's the real website. And don't respond to phone calls unless you're sure that it's coming from the person who it ought to be coming from. If you have any doubt about this, it's always safer to hang up and call a number that you can verify. One other telltale sign of a scam is that scammers want to get paid in a particular way. When they're asking for money, they're going to want to get paid in a manner that allows them to take the money and run. Sometimes that means that they're going to ask to be paid in gift cards. Sometimes it means they're going to ask for a wire transfer. Sometimes it means that they ask for payment in crypto. What's almost always a telltale sign of the scam, however, is that they demand that they get paid in this way and in no other way. Of course, a legitimate business partner is not going to make those sorts of demands. The government will never make those demands. And so this is a classic sign of a social engineering scam. Because our topic is cybersecurity today, I want to focus in particular on one kind of social engineering scam, the tech support scam. This is a kind of business impersonation scam where scammers pretend to be a trusted business. The business that they impersonate in this case is tech support for your company. The technique that they use is to create alarm by making you believe that there is some sort of problem with your computer network, a particular computer, and then they can pretend to be tech support, either internal at your business or external, and try to get information, access to your network, or payment of money. So what does this look like on the ground? You get an unexpected phone call, or you get a pop-up on your computer that tells you there's a problem. They say that there's an urgent problem with your computer network. And oftentimes, these sorts of scammers try to make the problem sound like something embarrassing or illicit in an effort to further upset and confuse you. Often, the person on the phone or the person who you call when you receive this pop-up says that they need to connect to your computer or to your business's network in order to fix the problem. Or they may ask for information like passwords and other sensitive information that can be used to access your accounts. Or they may straightforwardly ask for money and say that they need to download software onto your computer or that they need to pay to fix a problem with your computer. So how can you react if this happens to you? First and foremost, don't trust computer pop-ups that come out of the blue telling you that you've got a problem with your computer. Certainly don't trust messages that come to you by phone, email, or text telling you that there's a problem with your computer network. Real security companies don't work that way. Real secure computer networks don't work that way. And a real tech company or real tech support provider is never going to ask you to take the affirmative step of calling them. If you encounter somebody who reaches out with requests like that, hang up, disconnect, don't engage. You can always get in touch with your actual tech support provider, if you have one, through a trusted channel that you can verify, their real phone number that you can look up, their real website that you navigate to yourself. You should never, ever give a stranger access to your computer or to your computer network. There may be times when legitimate tech support needs to access your computer or your computer network remotely, but unless you are 100% sure that you're on the phone with your legitimate tech support provider because you called them, not the other way around, you should not click on links that they send you or give them information that they could use to access your computer. Likewise, you should never give a stranger a password that they can use to access any of your accounts or any aspect of your business. That's not something that legitimate tech support is ever going to ask for. If you need external tech support, the safest thing to do is to contact a company that you trust through a method that you trust. It's not to trust someone who contacts you out of the blue. Another major vector of cybersecurity fraud that we see is a technique called email spoofing. Imposter scammers of the sort that we've been talking about not only target small businesses, they also impersonate small businesses and then try to scam that business's customers or that business's partners. One of the most common ways that they do this is through a technique that we call email spoofing or business email impersonation. And it's a fairly simple technique. A scammer sets up an email address that looks like it's from your company. Maybe it's something that sounds like it would be a plausible email address for your company, but isn't your company's real website. Maybe it's off by one letter. Maybe they replace an I with a lowercase l in the website URL. Whatever it is, the email looks like it's your company's email. Then they use that spoofed email to send out messages that they can use to scam your customers or your business partners in all the ways that we've been discussing, to get their information, to demand payment from them, to get them to click a link, or to get them to download software. All of this, of course, can put your business's good name at risk, and it can harm your customers and your business partners. So what can you do to prevent this sort of tactic? Well, there are some technological steps. When you set up your business's email, you should make sure that your email provider offers email authentication technology. That allows email servers to verify that emails they receive are from who they say they're from. And when they can't so verify, the receiving server may block the email and foil a business email imposter. So it's an important technological fix. And of course, and this goes for really everything we're talking about today, you should make sure that you have cybersecurity software and that it's up to date, and ideally set to auto update. And you should make sure that people in your business are aware of scams like email spoofing, so that if they hear about a situation like this from your customers, from your business partners, they recognize what's going on and they know to act quickly. All that said, some of the tactics that I mentioned are ones that are hard to stop upfront with these sorts of technological fixes. And so what's really important is that you know how to respond to a situation where email spoofing is happening. First thing to do as soon as possible is notify your customers and business partners. You can use mail, email, social media, ideally as many channels as possible. If you do send an email, make sure it's an email without hyperlinks. You don't want it to look like a phishing scam from the email imposter. And in these contacts with your customers and partners, remind them not to share any personal information through email or text. You should also quickly move to report the scam to law enforcement. Your first stop can be your local police department. They'll at least be able to point you in the right direction. But you should also know that you can report cybercrimes like this to the FBI at their Internet Complaint Crime Center. I'll put up the link for that in a bit, but it's ic3.gov. Internet Complaint Crime Center, ICCC, ic3.gov. You can also report these sorts of incidents to the Federal Trade Commission and get resources on how to respond at ftc.gov/complaint. And I will put that link up as well. And we'll talk a lot more about the ways to report cybersecurity a little later in the cybersecurity threats a little later in the presentation. I think one of the cybersecurity issues that people are most familiar with and ought to be especially familiar with is phishing. Phishing is a technique that scammers use to gain access to your computer or your computer network. And the way they do this is by getting you to click on a link in a text or an email. To do that, they'll use many of the tactics that we've already discussed to impersonate a trusted source. So they may copy logos of a real business or the government, but they may spoof an email address or phone number, so the message looks like it's coming from a legitimate source. Whatever their technique, their goal is to get you to click on a link, which will allow them to install ransomware, spyware, or other viruses on your computer that can spread to your entire company network. They can lock you out of your data. They can record your data and use it. They can steal passwords. They can steal money. So what can you do to avoid this problem of phishing? First, do not ever click a link if you aren't sure where it came from. Look up the website or the phone number for the company or person behind a text or email you receive if you have any doubt if it's the real thing. Don't just click on a link because it says that it's from FedEx or the Postal Service or that it's from a customer. Do what you can to verify the source of that link. If you're not sure, pick up the phone and make a call to the vendor, colleague, or client who the email says it's from. Confirm what they really need from you, confirm that they really sent it, and use a number that you know to be correct. Don't just reply to the email that you were sent or the text that you were sent. Don't call a number that's provided in that source of information. When in doubt, verify a real form of contact and reach out that way. As I discussed, there are some technological solutions here, including the email authentication technology that we discussed, which can prevent phishing emails from reaching your company's inbox in the first place. If, despite these measures, your business does fall prey to a phishing scheme, there are a few steps that you should take right away. And ideally, as we'll discuss in a little more detail later, you'll have procedures in place in advance for people in your company to follow in the event of a phishing attack. The first thing to do is alert others right away. If you have IT support, either internal or external, alert them immediately and also inform all of your colleagues in your business. Phishing attacks often happen to more than one person in a company, and it's essential to catch them as soon as possible. If any passwords were compromised, you should change them right away. If any device was compromised or potentially compromised, you should disconnect it from your network right away. And if you have reason to believe that data or personal information kept by your company was compromised, you have obligations to notify the affected parties because they may be at risk of identity theft. Catching these sorts of phishing attacks as soon as they happen and acting quickly is key to minimizing the harm to your business and to your customers. One particularly serious negative result that can happen from a phishing attack is the installation of ransomware. Ransomware is a malicious software that holds your data hostage. It can block off access to specific data or it can shut down your whole network. Usually, ransomware attackers are going to ask to be paid by money or in cryptocurrency. But even if you do pay them, you don't know if they're going to keep your data or destroy your files and keep you locked out. And while these attacks are going on, the information you need to run your business, sensitive details about your customers or employees, could be in these people's hands. Ransomware attacks most often start with the sort of phishing attack that we've just been discussing. Somebody clicks on a link and that downloads malicious software. It's not the only way they happen, though. Ransomware attacks can also come from infected websites or downloads, and they can even be hidden in ads on otherwise legitimate websites, which is why it's so important not to click a link unless you're 100% sure what it is. They do also sometimes come through server vulnerabilities, a more sophisticated technological hack. But the most common way is that somebody clicks on a phishing link. Therefore, the most important way you can protect your business from ransomware is to protect it from phishing in some of the ways that we've been discussing. As I've said a number of times now, it's also important to keep your business's security software up to date. And it's also important to back up your data regularly to minimize the harm an attack can cause. Because if the threat is that you're going to be locked out of certain data or that data is going to be destroyed, having a backup can make that threat less scary. If you do fall subject to a ransomware attack, you should immediately disconnect the infected device from your network if you can. You should also report the ransomware attack to the FBI right away. Ransomware attacks are a serious crime, and the FBI will take a serious interest in any sort of attack like this. If your data has been stolen, you should take steps to protect your company and notify those who might be affected, including customers, partners, employees. And it's so important to have a plan in advance for how you would respond to a ransomware attack because it's scary and it requires you to make quick decisions. Having backed up data can be essential to keep your business running in this circumstance. Now, I should say that ransomware is called ransomware because the people who do these attacks are demanding a ransom in return for access to your network or to give back your data. And one of the hardest questions that a business owner faces in the face of a ransomware attack is whether to pay the ransom. Law enforcement does not recommend paying a ransom when you're faced with a ransomware attack, but it is ultimately up to you. It's important to know that paying the ransom does not guarantee that you're going to get your data back, It does not guarantee that you're going to get access to your network again. And so it's a serious consideration when faced with a threat like this, whether paying a ransom is worth it. One of the most important cybersecurity issues that businesses deal with now are data breaches. And those can happen in all sorts of different ways. They can happen from the sort of cybersecurity incursions that we've been talking about. They can come from a hack. They can also come from an insider theft or an insider publication of information, and they can happen inadvertently too. Information can be public when it wasn't meant to be. It can be on your website when you think it's private. It could be available for people to find when you think it's not so available. If a data breach happens, there are steps that you need to take to protect your business and your consumers. As soon as you become aware of a potential data breach, you should move quickly to secure your systems and fix vulnerabilities that may have caused the breach. Take all affected equipment offline immediately, but don't, if possible, turn those machines off until you can have them reviewed by data breach or forensic experts. If the data breach has a physical component, if someone walked into a secure room in your facility, you should secure those areas potentially related to the breach right away, lock them, change any access codes. In response to a data breach, you may need to work with a team of professionals who are experts in responding to data breaches. Exactly who you'll need will depend on the size and nature of your company and the scope of the potential breach. But you may consider working with independent forensic investigators to help you determine the source of the breach and the scope of the breach. These are professionals who can capture forensic images of affected systems, collect and analyze evidence, and outline steps you can take to remediate the breach. Excuse me. In the case of a data breach, you'll also likely need to consult with your legal counsel, and you may want to consider hiring attorneys who have expertise in responding to data breaches. Every state and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands have enacted legislation requiring notification of security breaches involving personal information. In addition, depending on the types of information involved in the breach, there may be other laws or regulations that apply to your situation. If you have a data breach, you should also get in touch with law enforcement. Your local police department, as I said earlier, is likely the place to start, and they will, if they can't deal with the problem directly, at least point you in the right direction. You may also want to look at resources at your state attorney general's office and the FBI, who can help with serious breaches, especially when they violate the criminal laws. After the breach, you're going to want to focus on fixing vulnerabilities in your network. Now, the particular technical steps you need to take are going to depend on the nature of the incursion. But you should think about what service providers or other third parties have access. Where are the points of access to your network and to your data? How your network is set up and how it's secured. And likely you'll want to work with cybersecurity experts who can analyze what went wrong and what can be fixed. There is a lot to be said about data breaches. I probably could have spent all of today's presentation talking about the various laws and practical steps you can take regarding data breaches. But rather than rush through it in the short time that we have, I'm going to refer you to some resources provided by the FTC. I'll put the links up later in the presentation, but the FTC has a guide for business entitled Data Breach Response. It's very comprehensive, and it's available on the FTC website, covers these issues and a lot more. The FTC has also put together substantial advice on how companies can consider security from the start when they're setting up their network and setting up their operations, and how you can assess your options and make reasonable choices for your business based on the sensitivity of the information involved. I'll say at the outset that this is also a complicated topic, and the FTC also has an in-depth guide for business on this subject called Start with Security. This is another link that I will provide you. And it's really useful, I think, because it not only covers practical issues about how to operate a network securely, It also covers legal issues that have arisen from a range of FTC cases that touch on data security issues. So I commend this guide to your attention, but I want to highlight a few points now. First, when you're setting up data collection for your business, don't collect personal information if you don't need it. And don't keep information you collect longer than you need. The first rule of data security is that nobody can steal what you don't have. Collecting information just because you think it might be useful down the line, but you don't have a real need for it, or retaining information sort of just in case, can complicate your security needs, and it can even create legal exposure under federal law and under state law. You should also take measures to restrict access to any sensitive data you do collect. If you've got vendors or contractors who need access to some personal information that you collect from your consumers or partners, that can be okay. You should think hard about giving that access to people, and you shouldn't give it to vendors or contractors who don't need it. Again, unnecessarily providing access to data that you collect can create additional points of vulnerability in your network, and it can risk exposure of sensitive data and give rise to legal issues. As much as possible on your network, when there's situations where people are going to be accessing sensitive information, you should be requiring secure passwords and authentication. That goes not only for customers or third parties, but also for employees at your business. Requiring complex and unique passwords avoids vulnerability because simple passwords can be hacked relatively easily. And non-unique passwords, meaning passwords that somebody's using maybe at your business, but also using for their personal email and also using for their, dentist and whatever other platforms they need to log into, those can be compromised by any data breach anywhere. And so it's important that you require that passwords that are used for your business be complex rather than simple and unique rather than repeated. One other point about collecting and using this sensitive information, you should be particularly attentive to the way that you're storing and transmitting that information. If you have to transmit sensitive information, make sure it's encrypted at every stage of transmission. This is an area where you're going to want to rely on experts and industry-tested methods. Don't reinvent the wheel. As I said, there's a lot to talk about on this subject, more than I have time for today. So I highly encourage you to review the FTC's Start with Security Guide for Business, and I'll be providing that link in a few moments. So I want to talk a little bit now about an approach that you can take in advance of cybersecurity issues arising that can help you to be ready to deal with some of these issues. The National Institute of Standards and Technology at the U.S. Department of Commerce works with businesses all across the nation to come up with standards that are reliable and trustworthy in all sorts of areas. And today I want to talk about the framework they've come up with for cybersecurity. The National Institute's cybersecurity framework is designed to help businesses of all sizes better understand, manage, and reduce their cybersecurity risk and protect their networks and data. It's a collection of best practices that can help a business decide where to focus your time and money for cybersecurity protection. The NIST cybersecurity framework is detailed, it's lengthy, it has a lot of really useful and also really technical information in it. Today, I'm just going to give an overview of what that framework covers, the main areas that you ought to focus on. And if this seems like something that would be useful for your business, I encourage you to go review the full framework on the website of the National Institute of Standards and Technology. You can see a link for that website on the screen, and I'll talk about some more resources they make available at the end of the presentation. Basically, the cybersecurity framework is composed of 5 aspects, 5 areas of focus. And each of them, the National Institute of Standards and Technology has some tips on what you can do, as well as some more technical information on how you can take the most appropriate measures in each of these areas. The first of the 5 areas of focus is identify. It's to identify key components of your technology system so you know what you have and what needs to be protected. The first step in identifying the key components of your technology system is to make a list of all equipment, software, and data that you use, including laptops, smartphones, tablets, point-of-sale devices, whatever you've got that's connected to a network, could be, you should know about it and you should have a list of it. You should also think of everybody you can who has access to sensitive data collected by your business. Employees, vendors, anyone else. And you should set out their roles and responsibilities in your company's cybersecurity posture. Using this information, the list that you've made and the list that you made of devices and of people who have access to information, you can develop a company cybersecurity policy. That policy should include a set of steps to protect against a cyber attack and to limit the damage if a cyber attack does occur. We've talked about some of the strategies that are available for that today, and there are resources from the FTC, from NIST, and from other sources, including cybersecurity professionals, that can help you further in working up a company cybersecurity policy. The second step in the cybersecurity framework is to act to protect your network from unwanted incursions. These are the actions you should be taking in advance to shield your network from the biggest cybersecurity threats out there. Now, some of the ways to do this involve the proper use of technology. So as you can see, conducting regular backups of data, encrypting sensitive data for storage and transit, using up-to-date security software, and having it auto-update regularly. Some of it is more a question of management. Controlling who logs onto your network and who uses your computers and other devices, knowing who those people are, why they need access, and what they're doing with their access. Having formal policies for safely disposing of electronic files and old devices to make sure that they're not available, that the data on them is not available to hackers. Training for everyone in your company on cybersecurity issues like those that we've talked about today. So a mix of these factors should be part of your cybersecurity posture in the protect step of the NIST cybersecurity framework. The third component of a cybersecurity framework is to detect cybersecurity threats against your network. Working with cybersecurity professionals, you should establish systems to monitor your computers for unauthorized access, software, and devices. And if your system catches any unusual activity, you should follow up and you should investigate it. That includes potential activity by unauthorized users, but it also includes unusual activity by your company's staff. And you should have procedures in place to monitor for that sort of unusual activity. The fourth step in the cybersecurity framework is to respond to a cybersecurity threat when it confronts your business. The best cybersecurity plan in the world can still fail, or it can still run up against a real cybersecurity threat. And you need to have a plan in place to respond if that happens. That plan should include notifying customers, employees, and others whose data may be at risk, that there has been a potential compromise of their data. It should include a plan for keeping business operations up and running. That will likely include having your data backed up and having a plan for what you need to do if some of your network has to go offline. As we've discussed already, you should be ready to report any sort of cyber incursion to law enforcement, whether that's the FTC, the FBI, or local law enforcement. You should have plans to investigate and contain an attack, disconnecting compromised devices from your network, closing off part of your network, operating off backup data, whatever is appropriate for the situation. You need to have a plan in place to limit the damage from an attack. And you should take into account the possibility there's going to be inadvertent events like weather emergencies or other unexpected disasters that could put data at risk. There's a lot of steps that you can bake into a cybersecurity plan. The National Institute of Standards and Technology's cybersecurity framework goes into those in a lot of depth. So you should look at that and figure out what works best for your business. Finally, after a cybersecurity attack, if one does happen, it will be time to take measures to recover and strengthen your cybersecurity for the future. After the cybersecurity attack is the time to repair and restore the equipment and the parts of your network that were affected. It's important that you keep both your employees and your customers, as well as third parties like business partners or vendors, informed of the steps you're taking to respond to a cyber attack while it's going on and to recover from a cyber attack after it occurs. And ideally, your cybersecurity policy should be updated with any lessons learned from a cyber incident that your business faces. What I've covered today is really only a portion of the cybersecurity support that's offered by the FTC and other government agencies to help small businesses protect themselves and their customers. There's a lot of agencies in the federal government, at the state level, at the local level, that are focused on these issues. And so I encourage you to seek out the agencies that have the information that's most useful to your business. I hope that you'll find some that are useful for your needs. The FTC has a very comprehensive set of cybersecurity resources for small businesses on our website. The link that's on this slide. You can also just get there by Googling FTC cybersecurity small business or something to that effect. And it includes information not only on the topics I've covered today, but also lots of other topics that I think are useful for a small business, including the ones that you can see on your screen here in terms of how to find a web host or other kinds of technical providers, cyber insurance, vendor security, email authentication. There's a lot of useful resources out there that can help you to strengthen your business's cybersecurity. There are also some really useful FTC resources on that page for training your employees as well as customers and partners for your business. The FTC provides print and video resources that you can use. And the videos are really user-friendly, they're short, they're well-made. And so they can be a useful tool not only for educating yourself, but educating people you work with in your business on basic cybersecurity practices. And that kind of information and education is really one of the cornerstones of cybersecurity. There are also quizzes you can use to test your knowledge or that you can use to help people in your business learn and test their knowledge of cybersecurity. I mentioned earlier several of the FTC's guides for business on a lot of the most relevant topics for small businesses in terms of cybersecurity. Here are links to some of the most salient ones. I've talked about the Start with Security mantra that the FTC is encouraging businesses to follow. The Start with Security Guide for Business covers measures that businesses can take to make sure that they're adequately protecting their own information and their customers' information. As I said earlier, it's focused on the issues that have come up in real litigated FTC cases in recent years. So it's very practical, not only from a technical perspective, but also from a legal perspective. It covers some of the issues that are most important to us as a law enforcement agency. The FTC's Data Breach Response Guide for Business covers in a lot more detail than I had time for today the steps that we recommend to prepare for and react to and recover from a potential data breach. And the FTC also has a guide for business on protecting personal information, which covers tips on how to handle personal information that you do need to collect from customers or other parties, how to collect, store, and transmit that data in a secure and responsible manner, and comply with relevant laws. Each of these guides for businesses is a really comprehensive resource, a really detailed resource. I also think that they're pretty user-friendly and written in plain English. So I encourage you to take a look if any of them seem like they might be relevant for you. The National Institute for Standards and Technology also has resources specifically targeted for small businesses. So in addition to the cybersecurity framework document itself, they have training videos that can break down specific aspects of the cybersecurity framework in a usable manner. And they have case studies drawn from the real world, real businesses that deal with cybersecurity issues. The link is available. The link is on the screen, or you can go to the National Institute of Standard Technology's website at nist.gov and navigate there. I think a lot of the most useful technical information that you're going to find comes from this resource. If you're interested in learning more about the cyber threats that are out there, the best place to look is the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. The FBI is the nation's central hub for reporting cybercrime, and they put out a detailed annual report with lots of information drawn from their law enforcement efforts and the law enforcement efforts of other agencies. It's a really interesting report, and it comes out annually. So if you want to learn more about the biggest threats that are facing Americans, that's a great place to look. It's also the primary place to go to report cybercrime that you encounter. So if your business does suffer any of the cyber attacks that we've discussed today or anything else, you should report it to the FBI. And the place to do that is ic3.gov, the link that's on the screen. You should also report any fraud that you encounter, even if you don't fall for it, even if you just see it. You should report fraud that you encounter to the Federal Trade Commission. If you or someone you know sees a fraud, a scam, or bad business practice, please tell the FTC. Even if you didn't lose money, even if your network wasn't compromised, tell us what you saw. We use these reports to investigate and bring law enforcement cases. We also use them to issue scam alerts so people know what sort of threats are out there and can protect themselves, their friends, and their family. When you make a report to the FTC, you get advice on what to do to recover and how to guard against fraud in the future. You get links to other resources that are available. So it's a really valuable website, a really valuable resource for anyone who encounters fraud, and we rely on these sorts of reports to be able to protect American consumers. Reports can be made online at reportfraud.ftc.gov or reportefraud.ftc.gov in Spanish. The reports can also be made by phone at the number that's on screen. It says there are other languages, and the FTC can take reports in a lot of different languages. We also can take reports in English at that phone number for businesses that prefer to report fraud that they encounter in English. So online or by phone, reporting fraud to the FTC is something that helps us do our job and can help you to protect yourself. Finally, I encourage you, if you found any of this presentation interesting or helpful, to stay connected with further updates from the FTC. ftc.gov/consumer alerts is the main channel that we use to report important issues to consumers that we're encountering in our law enforcement experience. ftc.gov/business alerts is the main channel we use to communicate with businesses the information that they need. They're short, relevant, I think, alerts that I encourage you to subscribe to if you have any interest in keeping up with the sort of issues that the FTC deals with. More broadly, there are resources on the FTC website, not just about the cybersecurity issues that we talked about today, but really about the vast majority of issues that consumers and businesses encounter in the economy today. And so you can visit the FTC website for that sort of information. And a resource that I think a lot of people don't know about, but that's really important, is that the FTC provides for free print resources or downloadable PDFs covering just about every topic you can think of related to fraud, scams, unfair business practices, tips for managing your business or your finances at ftc.gov/bulk order. So for example, if you want a short printout covering some of the most important cybersecurity issues we talked about today, you can get one for everybody in your business at ftc.gov/bulk order. And there's resources that cover all sorts of topics there. With that, I'll thank you for your time and your attention. I hope that you found today's presentation enjoyable and helpful. I hope you learned something useful today. And if you have, I hope you'll take the opportunity to pass it on to others in your community. The best way to prevent scams and frauds, whether they're cyber attacks or otherwise, is for businesses and consumers to be informed and prepared. So thank you for being here today. I look forward to any questions that you may have.
We do have some questions, a couple of great questions. One, can you share copies of today's PowerPoint presentation? Is that a possibility, or do you need to check on that?
Yeah, that's something I'm going to need to get confirmation from internally, but I
Figured as much.
will speak to some folks here at the FTC and to our hosts at the BBB and see if we can make that happen. At a minimum, as I've gone through a lot of the resources that are available and that cover some of the same content today, and we can talk about ways to make sure that those resources are readily available to the people who attended this presentation.
Okay. We have another terrific question. An attendee is asking, what counts as personal confidential information? Is that limited to social security numbers, EINs, birth dates, and the like, or would it include things like names, addresses, email addresses, phone numbers? What is and is not personal confidential information?
It's a great question. So I'm not going to talk about what might be covered by any particular legal regime, whether that's a state privacy law or the Federal Trade Commission Act. Those are really sort of complicated, nuanced regimes and something you need to talk about with counsel. In general, all of the types of information that that question listed are sensitive customer information that ought to be protected in some of the ways that we've been talking about today. Names and phone numbers may not seem like they're so sensitive, and those are things that are still in phone books, at least in some places. But knowing who engaged with a particular business and that person's contact information can provide a lot of resources for scammers to use, and so it's important to protect contact information and personal identifying information, along with what you might sort of think of as ordinary sensitive information like payment and social security numbers.
Okay. Another question that has come up, what percentage of cyber attacks in the US originate outside of the US?
It's a really good question, and some variation of that is the question I get almost every time I give a presentation. And I always have to give the same unsatisfying answer, which is it's very hard to be sure what percentage of cyber attacks originate here versus originate overseas, because it's so hard to track down these cyber scammers. Anecdotally, from what I've seen in my work and what I've heard from others, there's obviously a large portion of it that does come from overseas, and that can make it especially hard to shut these scammers down and get money back. But there's also a large portion of it that is domestic, and that's those are areas where the FTC and other law enforcement can take more steps to try and protect people. I know that's an unsatisfying answer, but the short answer is there's a lot of both.
Okay. A further question, is there a place to go to find out if someone has hacked into their cell phone, like a website? Is there a link of some kind? If someone clicked on a link accidentally on their cell phone, how would someone who is using a smartphone, for example, know if they accidentally gotten hacked?
So I'm not aware of there being a one-stop shop where you can go to check if you have been hacked, particularly if the question is if one of your devices has been compromised, especially a personal device. I don't think there's any sort of central resource, at least not one that I'm aware of, where you can check for that. But there's two things that I think are worth knowing about here. One is that oftentimes companies that have suffered a data breach have obligations to inform the people who are affected by that data breach. It depends, of course, on the particular laws that apply to that company, but oftentimes they do have an obligation to make that information available. So that won't let you know if your device has been hacked, but it is a way of finding out if your information was exposed in a data breach. The other thing I'll say is that there are certain signs that you may have fallen victim to a scam. So if you see unexpected transfers out of any of your financial accounts, that's obviously a sign that there may have been that your device may have been compromised, that you've otherwise been the victim of a cyber scammer. If you see accounts being made in your name that you don't remember creating, that's another very worrying sign that there may have been some sort of compromise of your data or your information, and that's something that you should act on immediately. The third thing I'll say here is that when in doubt, you should take precautions. So, you know, it happens to a lot of people. It's happened to me that you sort of get a text, you think, that looks like it's probably from FedEx, and you go to click on it. Now, I haven't actually clicked on it, but it's easy to make the mistake and just press it. If you have any concern that might have been a phishing link, then the best thing to do is act quickly to get in touch with tech support. If it's at your business, you should talk to your business's IT support, whether that's internal or external. If it's personal, it's totally appropriate to, you know, go talk to your phone company or the company that made and sold you your phone, or to private tech support providers. But, and this is really important, make sure that you verify that they're legitimate and that you contact them. Do not trust someone who says they're tech support and comes to you.
I have a question kind of related to that. With personal equipment and in hybrid environments, you may be using a personal cell phone or a personal laptop to connect to a business server. What kind of protocols should businesses have to ensure that those aren't vectors for a cyber breach?
Yeah, it's a good question, and frankly, probably a question that exceeds my technical expertise. Okay. It's going to depend on the nature of your business's needs, what, you know, the costs of providing devices versus allowing people to use their own devices. I will say that when people can use their personal devices for business and they're connected to the business's network, there's obviously a lot more activity going on somebody's personal device than would be going on if they had a separate personal and workplace device. And so I think that question, you know, has identified a potential risk, and it's something that businesses have to consider as part of their broader cybersecurity framework. Exactly what choice is going to be right for your business is going to depend on, as I said, your needs and your resources. And it's something that I would recommend working with a cybersecurity professional on.
What about vetting vendors? Another often forgotten vector.
Yeah, vetting your vendors and making sure that they have up-to-date cybersecurity practices is a hugely important part of business cybersecurity. It's not something I had time to cover in today's presentation, but I'll note that the FTC's cybersecurity for small business website has a whole section devoted to your vendors' cybersecurity and working with vendors. So I'll refer you to that portion of the website for a more detailed response here. In general, you want to make sure that the vendors you're working with have a cybersecurity policy in place, that they've thought about the sort of considerations we've been talking about today, and that it's a conversation you have with them, especially if they're going to have access to your network or access to any data that you're collecting. It's essential that you be sure that they have an understanding of best practices in cybersecurity, that their cybersecurity measures are up to date.
Okay, an attendee has put in the question box a comment about real-time cyber attack mapping, and the link is actually a Kaspersky link. Now, I read somewhere that Kaspersky software and other cybersecurity tools are going to be banned in the United States at a certain point. Do you have any thoughts about that? The news article I read said that the thought was that it was a dangerous channel that the Russian government might take advantage of.
Yeah, so I don't think I can comment today on any particular actions the government as a whole, you know, the United States as a whole might be taking for any particular, as against any particular cybersecurity software provider. And, you know, I certainly, you know, I'm not going to be in a position of sort of endorsing or commenting negatively on any particular business. I think what I can say to people is that it's important to do thorough research on any cybersecurity software that you're going to use. But that said, cybersecurity software is a really important part of a well-developed cybersecurity posture. It should be part of your cybersecurity policy. It should be part of your framework. Exactly what's going to meet your business's needs is going to depend on what your business does and how it does it, and what resources you have available to you. So cybersecurity software is important. Which vendor you should use is not something I can really talk about.
One last quick question, and we are at almost our time. Is stress testing a good idea? Stress testing your business.
I think, again, exactly what you're going to want to do to test your business's cybersecurity policy and posture depends on what kind of business you have, what you do, what your network looks like. In general, yes, you should think about the vulnerabilities that your business has in terms of potential data breaches or potential compromise of your network, and think about how to plug those holes and what you do in response. Exactly what a stress test entails, I'm not sure, but it might make sense in some circumstances.
Okay, well, with that, we are at our time, and I just want to thank you so much, Adam, for really robust and engaging presentation.
And I would like to also thank you, Adam. That was great. Luana, Lewis, thank you very much for taking the questions and moderating them, as well as our team in the background, making sure that this presentation went on without a hitch. I really appreciate you taking the time today. This was such important information, and all of those links are incredibly valuable to everybody that was on the call. So thank you very much. We appreciate you. We appreciate the speakers, all of you who attended and took time out of your day, and of course, our supporters. Once again, this was recorded, and we will be in touch with all of you who were attending today. And we're just really excited to be able to present these types of programs for the community. BBB accredited businesses, the sign of a better business. Be sure to let people know about it. All of those links, including Scam Tracker, can be found at bbb.org. Different businesses, and if you want to report a scam, as Adam, as you said, there are plenty of places to do that, including bbb.org, Scam Tracker. So with that, thank you all very, very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.